All right, so thank you so much for joining us here today for our conversation on what to do, how to how to start the process of getting a strategic plan. So thank you so much to Shazeen, Mufti, and Rubina for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Presenter view. There we go. And share. Hopefully, can you see it okay? And I will go to the beginning. That would also be a good thing. There we go. So we're here today with the American Muslim Community Foundation for our Social Impact Accelerator, one of our educational webinars. Today is, do you have a strategic plan? Again, with Shazeen Mufti and Rubina Chaudhary, MBA. Today's agenda is just a brief welcome, an intro to AMCF and the Women's Giving Circle, speaker information, upcoming events, the presentation, Q&A, and a thank you for joining us. So just a little bit about AMCF. Our vision is leading sustainable and strategic Muslim philanthropy for today and future generations. Our mission is cultivating donor giving and diversifying funding to advance charitable causes. And our core values are sacred, strategic, sustainable, collaborative, diverse, inclusive, and integrity. Just a little bit about AMCF. We were founded in 2016. We're the only U.S. organization dedicated to American Muslim philanthropy. We have distributed over $25 million during this time period to over 1,000 nonprofits. Just this Ramadan in 2025, we distributed $2 million out to a number of nonprofits. Currently, we manage approximately $8 million in assets, including 240 donor advised funds and 30 endowments. Of course, the number keeps changing, so that may not be the latest and greatest, but this was accurate as of a month ago. Our core programs are for donors and nonprofits. So for donors, we have donor advised funds and giving circles. We also have endowments and leadership development. And this Social Impact Accelerator is part of our nonprofit leadership development program here at AMCF. We also have a nonprofit resource center with a number of curated resources. We encourage you to check it out. And you can use the QR code, the bit.ly, or email nonprofitengage@amuslimcf.org for more information. Today, we're part of the Women's Giving Circle, which I'm a proud member of. Our purpose is to harness the power of American Muslim women through collective giving. We combine and democratize our giving. We amplify women-focused nonprofits. We support Muslim women in leadership and provide seamless donation to organizations chosen by our members. So it's a very democratic, very collective. How it works? Well, you join with a member of any amount of $5 or more. You can become a voting member with a donation of $35 a month or more. Then you nominate. Each of our members are able to nominate an eligible organization for funding with the preference given to nonprofits serving or led by American Muslim women. This will be at the end of the cycle, which will be about August for this year. Voting members can then determine the finalists and the top 3 organizations that will be funded. So we have a 2-tiered voting process. And then what do? Well, over the past 4 years, we have collectively raised and distributed $41,000 to 6 nonprofits. So huge thank you to our generous members. Last year, in the 2024 Giving Circle cycle, Muslim Legal Fund of America received $7,500 in unrestricted funds. All of Community Services here, Rubina, our guest speaker, is a founder of this organization. They received $4,500. And Pillars of Peace in New York City, they received $3,000 for their domestic violence shelter. So congratulations to the honorees. And a few of our upcoming programs. So next week, we'll be having a member-only salon, June 26th. So I encourage you to become a member, to join us. And we will be discussing funding priorities for the 2025 Giving Circle. So encourage your voice, encourage your attendance. Next month, we'll be having a very informative talk on the art of impactful giving, strategic philanthropy and tax tools for Muslim women by Iman Shabli, CPA, and a leadership circle member. So excited for that. And then also on July 12th, we'll be having a member-only SoCal Salon with motivational talks and networking hosted by a Giving Circle member, Rubina Chaudhary, here today. And we'll have talks by Rubina as well as Zahra Al-Jabri from Practical Muslim. We'll also have a special offer for our guests today Muhi Khwaja, AMCF co-founder, has offered a free 30-minute webinar on strategic planning. Just click on his link, amuslimcf.org//Muhi and sign up for a free webinar. Not a free webinar, for a free meeting with him. He's got loads of expertise and advice cultivated over the past number of years. And we encourage you to join us, become a member of the 2025 Women's Giving Circle today on Grapevine. There's a link. Join us, help us to amplify the voices of American Muslim women. Now we want to welcome Shazeen Mufti, AMCF Strategic Nonprofit Consultant. We'll also be transitioning into a leadership role at AMCF in the near future. So congratulations to Shazeen. And we also have Rubina Chaudhary, MBA, the founder and president of Mars Services, as well as the founder and president of Olive Community Services. So huge honor to have both these talented ladies join us today with their expertise. So a short bio of Shazeen, a strategic nonprofit consultant, a change management consultant who specializes in developing strategies, setting up systems, and streamlining operations to increase the impact of nonprofit leaders. She has led a number of organizations over the years, including Developments in Literacy, DIL, and the South Asian Network. She's currently on the board of the Orange County chapter for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP, and she chaired the 2024 National Philanthropy Day event for Orange County chapter of AFP. She holds a certificate in nonprofit management from Chapter University and lives in Orange County, California with her husband and son. And I will correct the typo in a moment, so just saw that. And then Rubina Chaudhary, mashallah, founder and president of both Mars and Olive Community Services. So she is the current president and one of the founding members of Olive Community Services. Her passion for elder care and the driving force behind Olive stem from her experience caring for her parents from afar as they reside in Canada. Rubina envisions Olive to be one of the best culturally appropriate organizations in California, serving seniors, their family, and their community locally and globally. At Mars, she has created a culture of collaboration, integrity, and quality in serving clients. She has supported large transportation, environment, infrastructure programs, and her vision is simple: grow together, with a vision to grow to providing superior services to clients and providing career opportunities to her staff. So again, these are just very, very brief highlights of these talented ladies' bios. And now we have our presentation. Do you have a strategic plan? I believe, Shazeen, you were going to start. That's correct? Or do you want or Rubina, would you prefer to start?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Let's try to let me share. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
And you may want to put it in presenter mode. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Shazeen.
All right. So wanted to start off today. Our topic is, do you have a strategic plan? And we asked that question because, you know, a lot of organizations don't actually have a plan. So first we want to start off with, what is a strategic plan? And a strategic plan is a tool to define where your organization wants to go and what actions you will take to achieve those goals. Sounds simple enough, but for many organizations, I think that it has been complicated by how nonprofits do things. And so there's a lot of misinformation in what strategic planning is, who can do it, why you do it. So why many organizations don't have a strategic plan is they think that they need a consultant to do a plan. And that's simply not true. And oftentimes strategic, consultants are very expensive. So instead of engaging in that process, organizations simply feel like, they can't afford it, therefore they can't have a strategic plan. And that's simply not true. And they don't know how to create a plan themselves. And that's what we're going to go through today. It's kind of like the DIY of doing your own plan. And it's not to say that maybe someday you're not going to engage with the consultant, because hopefully we're all organizations are growing, you're building your capacity. And as you, get into, more complicated ways of doing business in a nonprofit, you do want to engage with the consultant. But while you're maybe in the beginning stages, you're in startup, like how can we, hack a strategic plan without a consultant? And there's many ways of doing that. And we're going to be talking about that in just a second. The other thing is oftentimes people create strategic plan with consultants, but they don't utilize them, right? Most plans are very big picture, but not very practical. Most plans are never shared with the staff or connected to job duties. And most plans are not tied to yearly action plans. So they kind of, back in the day, we used to say, when they were in binders and printed out, that they kind of sat on a shelf and, just created dust up on the shelf. And nowadays, as they're digital, they kind of just, they're not oftentimes utilized enough. So what we want to go through today is how you can create one yourself, the things you might want to, the questions you might ask to create one, and then how to then incorporate it in so you're actually utilizing the strategic plan for your organization. Because we really believe that, having a plan, and it's not to say that you have to always stick to the plan, because new things come up, things change. I like about a 3-year out, because these days it's too far out to think 5 years. You want to have a general idea, but you want to revisit your, and we'll talk about that, how often you revisit your strategic plan. Are you updating it regularly? How are you doing that? So the traditional strategic planning was, where are you, the strategy and the vision, what's your mission, vision, and desired future state, and what's the strategy? And if you need to go to that and make it as simple as that, I think that, that is the least, if that's the easiest way to do it, then let's do that. But I'm going to give you some things to think about, some questions to ask to actually develop your plan, so it has a fuller scope. Because oftentimes what happens is that we don't, sometimes evaluate all the pieces that need to go into a plan, and then we don't sometimes see some changes coming. So the strategic planning process. So I just wanted to let you know that, people are like, okay, what model should I use? There's different models out there, and I'm going to be sharing one model, one that I have adjusted to kind of fit the needs of nonprofits, and specifically the nonprofits that I've worked with. And I'll share why that is. But there's different models out there, right? And there's no one solution for every organization, right? When in doubt, just choose one and work with it, and it will help you figure out your needs and how to tweak it for your use. You can use the model, and we'll share it out in our resources. I have some different resources there, but I'll share that with you in just a second. But what I want to say is just start where you're at, right? Because if you do that, you'll figure, like, nothing is perfect. If you're waiting for the perfect model and plan to show up to do it, that's not going to happen. So we're always kind of tweaking, because, our community is a little different. It depends so much on the environment you're working in and stuff like that. So the general process, right? It's a hodgepodge of different things, bringing them in, right? You look at your personal values, the history, employee ideas, trends, organizational values. They go all into a large brainstorming session. You revisit your mission each planning process. Oftentimes people say, oh no, we need to stick with our mission. But as you're doing the work and you're getting feedback, oftentimes you're going to be shifting, right, what you're doing. And so that needs to be reflected in your mission. So it's important to make sure your mission ties in with the work you're doing, because I know I work for an organization, and originally they were a literacy organization, right? And I remember talking to volunteers well into our, history of our organization. They were still communicating it as a literacy organization. When we were an educational organization, we were schools, so we weren't just literacy. And it's important to make sure that when you shift and change your mission, that it is communicated out to your community, to your advocates, right? Because oftentimes, like, they're working with the mission they started with rather than where you're at. And so it's important to communicate this out to all your stakeholders. So you look at your mission, you look at your market, you want to look at your key success factors, and we'll talk about a little bit about this. And then, it's like, where are we? Where do we want to go? How will we get there? Right. And that important part here is that, the important piece of the action planning. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. So some of the key questions to ask that we were just talking about. What do we want to be in the future? Oftentimes people's vision is for the current, but when you're looking at vision for your organization, it is the ideal you want to create, right? It's not a state we're supposed to be on, because it's always then moving us forward, right? Then your strategy is, how do we intend to accomplish our vision, right? Then you get into your specific objectives. What must we complete to move forward? Then you have your critical success factors. What areas must we focus on to achieve our vision? It's very important to tie these back into key performance indicators, or KPIs. And those are like, what are our metrics and indicators for success? Because if you're not measuring against certain KPIs, if you're not measuring that, how do you know you've achieved this success? It could be that you're getting feedback, and that could be part of your KPIs, right? What feedback we get back, what stories we're told. Storytelling is an important part of key performance indicators, right? Oftentimes we kind of stop at, okay, the financials, and, for us, it's the, assets under management. But what is a larger story? For us, that might not be our goal is to have a lot of assets, because our goal is to, as a community foundation, is to get more money in the community, so that it's not to hold on to it. So maybe that financial component might not be one of our indicators, where it might be for a traditional DAF organization or other community foundations. And then that results in our key action initiatives, right? What action programs will achieve our performance goals? And so an important part you're seeing is that we're actually want to know what our metrics are before we actually decide on our performance goals for our programs, because it's like, what do we want to achieve? That comes before how do we achieve those goals, right, with our programs and services. And oftentimes it's we leave out the performance indicators and just rely on our programs without measuring them. And so, especially for us, we want to make sure that the organizations we work with, that the numbers and our qualitative and quantitative evaluations serve to create a story and narrative about our community, right? And that really needs to be thought of before, because I've worked at organizations and they do great work, and you come to try to apply for grants and do these things, and they haven't measured, right? They haven't even thought about what their success looks like, and they haven't measured it. So when you go back and try to say, hey, we do great work, there oftentimes isn't the data behind it, right? And that's one of our key goals, is to make sure that we have those conversations with the organizations to be doing that on a regular basis. So most organizations have a gap between strategy and action, and it's because we talk about the vision, we talk about values, we talk about vision and strategy, and then we kind of just go to strategic outcomes. And there's pieces missing within the strategic planning process, and it's why most plans don't get executed on. And so these are the important pieces of tying in strategy with then having your outcomes, right? And an important part of that is an implementation methodology, right? And if you have an implementation methodology, I don't want you to change that. The one I'm going to introduce to you is a balanced scorecard, and I'll go into why I like that methodology. And it works for the type of work I do, in organizations and as a consultant as well. And we tie those in then with the strategic initiatives and then the personal objectives, right? It's like, how do you try that strategy into individual job duties? And we'll get into that. Okay. So as I said, this is kind of the methodology that we go through from a balanced scorecard perspective as a planning process. I am not certified in this. I do not it's just something that I've used and that I have molded. So I don't use their original. I've molded it to nonprofit best practices and community best practices. So I wanted to go through each one of these elements and what it includes, so you can include this in on as you're developing something. And it's a 9-step process. And it seems like a lot, but if you're going over this process, strategic planning is a continual process, right? And it's not a one and done. You're always working on your strategic plan. It should always be part of a job duty of an executive and a conversation between the executive, the staff, and the board, and how you are continually working on your strategy, trying to make it better, getting feedback on it. So as you can see, it's a continual process, not a one and done. So the first part is an assessment. So what does an assessment include? So the base things that you want to look at, right? We always talk about a SWOT analysis. And that is, we usually talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we call that SWOT. I like to, instead of weaknesses, I would like to talk about challenges that you have, because it's not necessarily a weakness. It's just something you need to address, right? And it's not a continual weakness. It's just the challenges you're having at the time. So just an important thing, right, with strengths and weaknesses, that's internal. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your organization, of your, maybe staff, of your programming? And then opportunities and threats, that's an external focus, right? That's things that are not always in your control, but that you need to know because they're going to affect your organization. So if you're doing an effective SWOT analysis, you're always also looking at external factors. And I want to kind of tell you what that is. And if you're not looking at all of these elements, sometimes this is where organizations don't fully look at some of the things that they don't realize that it's going to affect them. So you always want to look at the political, what's going on, because as we can see, that can affect nonprofit funding. It affects, what's in for funding. There's times when, homelessness is more, gets bigger funding. There's times when it's children's issues. There's times when it's senior issues. It's a mix. So always understanding and looking out at, especially, the people who are, in office and what they're advocating for helps you understand. You can't and those are, again, external factors. We can't control it, but we can understand it better. And know that it's going to, how it's going to impact us. What's going on in the economic industry, there's times where people give more because, they're making more, there's more excess, and they give more because they have more discretionary money right now because, people's fear not knowing what's going on is affecting giving, right? And again, not in our control, but if we know that that's coming up, we put it into our planning, how we incorporate it in. There's social factors that go in, what's going on with technology. Oftentimes that's, affecting how people give. So a few years ago, we didn't do anything in cryptocurrency. But now we as an organization receive cryptocurrency, right? So we had to understand, how to take that in, how to incorporate that into our business model. Always knowing what's going on with the environment, right? There's going to be some impacts in how people do things, how they, sustainability, and then the legal aspect, right? You always want to know things like right now, there are new laws out there, right? And they impact us. And yes, they weren't around 6 months ago, but they're around now. So incorporating and understanding that goes into understanding and how you make decision and putting that in place. So I wanted to really kind of emphasize this because this is not an element oftentimes that when people do we do DIY plans that we always look at all these, right? And oftentimes you can, there's experts in the field that often are on your board or on your committees and stuff, and you don't have to know all of this yourself, right? You just have to have access to people who have this information. And then the next part is the strategy. So this is where I really want to talk about this model. Most organizations focus on building out their programs and services at the cost of internal capacity of operations. And it's important to incorporate a sustainable growth model into our strategic plan. And this is one of the main reasons I use this methodology, is because it doesn't just look at programs, right? It really balances out your vision and strategy between your programs and services, your business processes, your organizational culture, and resource development. So you're looking at all parts when you're doing your planning. Like I said, as a consultant, oftentimes when I come into an organization is when people focus so much on programs that they don't focus on these other things, oftentimes the business processes and systems. And then it's a big discrepancy. And then, part of it is coming in and figuring out how do we balance that. And oftentimes that comes at the, you don't want to grow as fast. You want to grow more sustainably because that's going to get you further. And then that leads to strategic objectives, a strategy map, performance measures, and then strategic initiatives. So I'm just going to go through that through this process. So for us, so a balanced strategy, as I said, looks through all this, what we call these different perspectives. It's not just about how do you grow programs, right? So for programs, like how must we work and communicate with our donors, nonprofits, and community to create social impact? From a business process perspective, what business processes must we excel at to accomplish our mission? Organizational culture perspective, how must our people learn, grow, and communicate to achieve our vision? And then from resource development, how must we grow our financial resources to be successful? So if you're looking at all of those elements at the same time to create your strategy, you have a very balanced strategy, right? So again, that's why I use this, because I'm always, from this methodology, I'm always looking at these questions and answering these questions. So it's continual growth on all of these elements rather than just focusing on one. So this I'm sharing, and this is part of our strategic objectives. So we took that, and this is how we answered that question. And we did break up our program into two separate areas of program delivery and program promotion. So our strategic objectives for AMCF are to strengthen our existing services while adding community building programs. Our program promotion is to amplify our impact by increasing our visibility and partnership opportunities. From a business process standpoint, our plan is to develop strong operational practices to support community building programs and services. From organizational culture perspective, we want to create a collaborative culture by investing in our people and helping them grow. Oftentimes that's left out in nonprofits because we do a lot at the expense of our employees, and I will always advocate that, it's the people in nonprofits that make nonprofits work. And, it's very important that we invest in our people and not overlook that part, because oftentimes that's where we cut corners. So resource development, we want to create and fund a sustainable values-driven growth model. And like I was saying, so that might mean that we're not going to grow as fast because we're concentrating on other things. right? And we're okay with that. We don't need to grow as fast as long as what we're doing is growing sustainably. Okay. And then I'm just going to flip through this just so you know. So this is all of that, all of what I just mentioned, those strategic initiatives put in a strategy map that includes all the elements from all the different perspectives and how we're going to carry through with our strategy, right? So it has all the different elements, including, like I said, invest in our people through equitable pay, looking at pay structures, how we improve, we're adding a new financial system to better report out, right? It's incorporating all of those things. Like, it's not just, oh, we're going to improve processes, it's how we're going to do it, and then the strategy and the initiatives to do that. So if you're looking at that, it's important to, as I was saying, and this is going to be different for everyone, right? But you want to look at each individual perspective and what, like we said, these are what we're going to do, how we're going to measure it, right? And how that then leads into each initiative and what we accomplish. So I just want to give you a sample one because people are like, oh, what is it? So this is a sample one. It's not necessarily ours, but I wanted to share with you for this sample, if the goal is to increase brand awareness online, right? Then the objective you have, like, okay, we're going to grow our Facebook community by 100%. This is just an example. Increase engagement, right? And then how we would measure that is, for this one, is number of likes, right? And so this is different for each organization. We have our own metrics that we do for our social media and our marketing. This is not one of them, but I just want to share out this one organization and what they had set up. So you're thinking, so for each one of those, as I pointed out, you're going to find out what those metrics are. And that's where you're going to evaluate how well you're doing. So for us, these are, we tied in what I said, the larger picture, and then we came up with how we broke that down in a timely way, right? And so for us, an important part of our donor services is reviewing and revising our investment strategy, right? And for our nonprofit sector, it's in revamping our social impact accelerator, which some of these we've already done because we're within this, and we've launched a few of these things. Diversifying funding, all of these things are what we're working on. So we don't need to do all of it at once. It's over a 3-year period, and it incorporates all of our initiatives and provides a timeline for that. So the way I look at it is, if you incorporate your strategic plan into your annual planning, you can set up an automatic analysis of your methodology, right? You don't have to wait 3 years and say, hey, what worked, what didn't. If you're continually looking at it from an annual perspective, you are always in an analysis mode. And one of the ways we do that is incorporating it into our annual budget, right? This is our annual budget. We have restricted and unrestricted. And if we incorporate all of our initiatives into our budget, every month as we report out to the board, we're analyzing what we plan to spend, what we actually spent, what the discrepancy is. So we're continually analyzing and evaluating that. Another thing is alignment, right? This is the part where oftentimes where I was showing you that strategic plans go off the rails, right? Is that you have the plan, but it's not incorporated into your operations, right? So how do you align operations with the strategic plan? So first thing is translate the strategy into operational terms, align the organization to the strategy, right? It's not, so it's not sitting out by itself, and make strategy everyone's job. So each one of your job duties for your employees they need to tie back into how they're going to work on the strategic plan, right? If their thing is to create, like for us, we have a very specific initiative of reviewing our investment policy, right? That is on someone's, one of our employees' to-do list, right? So we can evaluate, have we done that? If we're not doing it, what are the reasons we're not doing it? What are the hurdles? So it's not always that it doesn't get done, but why it doesn't get done, then we have to address those issues, right? And then, like I said, strategy is a continual process. We don't just stop with strategy. It's like we're always saying, hey, we're always measuring back to it. And then it's important for leadership to communicate that to staff, that here's where we are, with our plan. And like I said, I always, with employees, it's not that they don't get things done, either they don't have the resources or the time to do it, right? So that's the evaluation methodology. It's not necessarily, a personal thing. It's an organizational thing of why something hasn't come to. Lisa, do you have a question?
I'm just being mindful. I want to make sure we give Rubina time to
Yeah, I'm
share
wrapping
her
up.
stuff as well. So just
Yeah. I'm on my last couple of slides. And then evaluating, like I said, if for us, it's reporting back to the board on a quarterly basis. And if you're doing that, like I said, you're always then analyzing your data and evaluating what's working, what's not. And it's okay to change your parameters in the middle, as long as you know why, and you communicate and reflect that back. So key takeaways, start where you were at, connect employee job duties to key deliverables. And main thing I say to everyone, operationalize your strategy with your annual budget. And then one methodology that that you can utilize is something that Rubina is going to be talking about. So thank you from my part. And I'm going to stop sharing.
So thank you so much, Shazeen, for those wonderful information. Perhaps if you have a checklist or something that might be helpful, or I try to take notes on the steps for the plan, but those are very interesting and very helpful information. So thank you. And I just want to make sure we give time to Rubina, who's also much to share. Looks like we would need hours and hours for the two of you wonderful ladies to really share your expertise. So and we're keeping you in a tight box. So. And you're muted, Rubina.
That would be important, wouldn't it? So that you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, now I have my presentation. Where is my present mode? Remember, Lisa,
At the top right, where it says share in the red button. The next one. Yeah.
Oh, is that it?
I think it should be presenter underneath.
No, there was one here earlier. Who's online that knows how I can, I could do it. Slideshow, let's try that. From current slide.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Lisa and Shazeen and AMCF for having this such a great social impact accelerator topic. Do you have a strategic plan? And it's a really an excellent question. And I'm going to limit my comments to how Olive is applying that concept, because Shazeen, you've done a wonderful job of sharing the methodology. So thank you very much for that. And Olive has done that at, to different extents. Does Olive have a strategic plan? Yes, Olive has a strategic plan. Its first strategic plan is part of our organizing document, the 501c3 application. They're required to outline your vision. And for us, that is the strategic plan, and we keep on coming back to it. And we feel that we're still, very much on target with the mission and vision of Olive as we identified in our application narrative. So, but what we've done since 2020 is, yes, we have a plan. Yes, we talk with each other a lot. But we started using the best year yet methodology. And you might wonder what the best year yet methodology is, and why is Rubina talking about the best year yet methodology again? I was introduced to the best year yet methodology maybe 25 years ago for my company Mars. We had hired an outside consultant to do a strategic plan, and he had us go through, different stages. And at the end of it, he gave me a book, which I'll pull out from my drawer, which is not far away. This one. He says, now you're ready. Read this book. And for all those years, I've read that book, and I've manually done my personal best year yet plan on the last day of the year. And I've also taken it to my employees, friends, family, whoever would listen. And I've even gone one step further. I have become a certified facilitator and presenter in that methodology, along with 4 of my associates. So this is really a methodology that I buy into. Again, this is only one of the methodologies. There are gazillion methodologies out there, but you have to pick one and you have to stick with it. And that is my, one comment on the methodology. For us, the best year yet methodology, it has a few components. One is that each year we do about an 8-hour workshop where we look at what we did, our accomplishments, our disappointments, lessons learned, and at the end, and our values and priorities, and the whole, it's a full day, pretty comprehensive, reflective look, and then forward looking. And then we come up with this 1-page plan. Then, Shazeen mentioned a couple times that often plans are made and they sit on the shelf or in a folder on electronically now. Well, we meet monthly to visit our plan, set the goals for the next one. Then we score it, and then we discuss, are we still on track? So that really is a very, very significant component. Yes, that adds another activity for staff and volunteers and everybody involved to do. And yes, there are sometimes, competing priorities, but you really need a champion within the organization who says that your strategic plan, your monthly planning, your quarterly, your annual planning is a quadrant 3 activity. By that I mean it's not urgent, but it's very important. And in Olive, I am that champion for the planning, and I pull everybody and bring them to the meetings, and we do the best that we can. We're not always 100% on track, but it's better to be doing it than to be letting it catch dust or electronic dust. Then we do our annual reviews and celebrate, and it has many, many, tools, this methodology. So I'm going to share a little bit about the methodology. It really comes down to that is what you believe impacts your behavior, and your behavior impacts results. So if you think the strategic planning and monthly meetings are going to help you move your organization forward, it will impact your behavior, and it will impact your results. It's based on this, what we call the transformational model. In the workshop, we take a look at accomplishments, disappointments, lessons learned. What were our limiting behaviors? What are our limiting beliefs? What is it that we're telling ourselves that's really hampering us from achieving what we want? And then we go through that reflective exercise through looking at our values, And then we go through a moment of change where we create a new empowering paradigm. So if you say, oh, well, we're lazy people, we say, no, we're not lazy people. We're very energetic, positive people. Then the next half, I'm going very fast because of time. The second part of this transformation model is selecting your major focus. You know, in every organization, we have many, many, many things to do, and you can't always be doing all of them. So you do have to prioritize. So you pick one major focus for the year. That doesn't mean that you ignore the other things. It's just that that is your major focus. And we come up with top 10 goals that we feel that will help us have the best year yet. And it is really a 3-step process. We have the breakthrough through making the plan, then follow through tracking the plan, and then mastery. Each month is also accompanied with a learning module. And there, everything, there's significant learning that goes on as well, skills learning. And it also has state-of-the-art tools. This is what we will get as a best year yet plan. For my last 20 plus years, I have for each of the year. For Olive, we have best year yet plan for each year. It's always a little bit different, something similarity, some different. This is the monthly and quarterly tracking and scoring, and also setting goals for the next week through producing results online software. And this is where all the audio lessons and transformative learning happens. Here you get bite-sized pieces in key developmental areas. So you're doing your in-service, your training, your reminding each month when you meet. It may only be 15 minutes, because most of the times the good things that we need to do, we know what they are. We just need to be reminded. Hey, remember, that's the thing you're supposed to do. And it does also have an app which you can carry on your cell phone or your tablet as well. What I've done, as I shared with you, that I've gotten myself certified as a facilitator partner. I also have my team, and we have offered workshops in the community. And the most recent validation to me was one of our local nonprofits came to me and they wanted to talk to me, a couple ladies. So let's talk. So we had conversation, and they said, we want you to do for us or for our organization what you did for Olive. And I said, well, why you didn't do anything? Well, you're doing those great things. And we met the second time. Then I felt that I should introduce them to the methodology. So I introduced them to the methodology. And this coming weekend, my team will be doing a best year yet plan for a local nonprofit. And I'm hoping that we will be successful, and I'm hoping to take this to other nonprofits, other women, people in the community, and I'm looking forward to a friendship and association with AMCF, this Accelerator program, because that helps increase the reach. We have the tool. It's very simple tool. It's not elaborate. It doesn't scare people, and it's a very affordable tool as well. And at the end of the day, I think Shazeen emphasized it, that if we plan with purpose and we act with passion, we will increase our social impact. I am available for any questions. Please reach out to Olive or reach out to me or to Lisa if you want more information. And we'll make sure that we can join hands and take all of us further to where we want to go. So thank you. I finished quickly.
Well, thank you so much, Rubina. That was very interesting. I hadn't heard of the Best Year Yet program, so that's some really great suggestions and a program. I will open it up if anybody has a question, or if you, as things settling down, you think of other resources or questions that should be shared, please feel free to unmute yourself to ask, or you put it in your chat. There's just not too many people here, so please feel free to unmute, put yourself on video, ask a question, or put in the chat. Rubina, perhaps you could indicate the best year. What is the website if somebody wants to look for more information, or should they reach out to you yourself? What's the best way
The
to
parent
find out
company,
more information?
the parent company is InterraWorks.
Can you put it in the chat?
Yes.
I want to make sure I spell it correctly. I found the book.
Are you okay? Yeah. And there are people on the call. I think they may have participated. I would be interested in the experience. I see some Olivers.
Yeah. So if anybody's here that you want a question, oh, thank you. And we'll also be sending this information out as well.
Now, this is, the methodology that, as I said, I've used personally for my personal planning, and I've also used it for business planning as well. You need a tool. It's one of the tools.
Also, it's good for personal and professional.
Oh, definitely. Personal and there's an individual plan and a team plan. And you could do it, a group of individuals could do the plan together. And that actually is my preferred method. It also becomes economical, and it also, you learn from each other. And I love that group think.
Yeah, so the attendees say thank you so much.
Oh,
There's Zainab. Do you have any suggestions or
muted,
thoughts on it, Zainab?
muted.
Thank
Okay.
you so much for the presentation. I took a lot of screenshots of some of the slides, so I appreciate you all. Yeah, I think, one way or the other, it's a great way to document. Having, like Rubina mentioned, we should have some type of tool. And I think one thing that I learned from Best Year Yet that could also work in our personal lives is you work backwards, right? What is your end goal? And then, because that's what that strategic planning meeting that happens for 8 hours, like what would your best year look like? And then you move backward, like how would you achieve it? And there's some really good terminology that we learned from it, like goal time, when time is important, big rocks, small rocks. These are things that we learned from, using it, like, whether some things are bigger priorities for us to work on as an organization, and some may not be as big. So anyways, there's always a good way for us to utilize our time and have something documented. So thank you so much again. This is perfect because we have a meeting coming up next week. So I'm going to be applying a lot of what I learned today. So thank you.
Thank you for joining. So
Just as introduction, Zainab is the program manager at Olive Community Services, and she's participated right from the beginning of the Best Year Yet program. So she's been part of this for 5 years.
and
Yes.
can you see, Zainab, since you've been doing it, do you see year over year? Have you seen progress? Is it
I
a
think
way to
there's
that?
a few elements. Number one, participation is key.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes there's great stuff that you see in theory, but then, it needs the team effort. There's so much in there that has opportunities for us to participate in. I think that's the challenge sometimes, is getting more people to attend these meetings, making sure that it's taken seriously. And, that aspect of it is essential for success. You talked about KPIs developing. That's some of our, I can't remember, guidelines. I think it's one of our guidelines is developing guidelines. So for example, we do programs at Olive. How many people participate? and what would be a success marker for us to say, oh, this is a very successful program, we need to keep doing this more often. So things like that are things that we're developing now as we growing as an organization and as we're expanding in different locations. So I know we're at times, I don't want to take more, but yeah, I do feel there is an element of success if we get the participation and also are actively, engaged with it. With any plan, I think that's the case, right? It's not just one.
That's what I was going to say, Zen. I think, and I think Shazeen would say the same thing. The whole thing, like, if you don't have buy-in, no matter how good your plan is, it's just a plan.
It's just a plan. Exactly. It's like going to school, right? You get your textbook, but if you don't succeed on that test, then it ain't.
Well, if you don't read the book, you're not going to succeed.
Exactly. But yeah, I think it's important that we all, as nonprofits, I loved what you said, Shazeen, about, employees, getting their, like, investing in the people. Nonprofits do bring in very passionate people who work not for the money, many times for the purpose. And that's a great point, because it's the whole starvation cycle that we see with nonprofits when we don't invest in admin costs, operations, and all this. This is important that people and donors actually understand that. Yeah.
And that is something we are, fully going to be engaging in, having those conversations with donors, because they don't see that element of it, right? They want to see the result, but results come from staff time.
Exactly.
Right. We sent out, a request recently, and a donor came back and said, oh, 65% of your costs are staff. And I was like, that's kind of low. Right. I mean, that's how the work gets done.
Yeah.
Right. In for-profits, you have all these types of things. We try to limit as much as we can and save on items. And, our thing is to people make it work. People make nonprofits work. Right. And our job is to fund that. Right. And develop the funds for that. And then part of, like you were saying, is those of us that are the connectors need to have the conversation with the donors, right, about what it really takes to do the work, right? Really frank conversation. So thank you for that. It re-energizes me to make sure we're having
we have to
conversations
educate.
on both sides, right?
Yeah,
The
we have
giving
to
side
educate.
as well as the receiving side.
Yeah, I think we need to really educate the donors that operations and admin costs are necessary, are essential. I mean, I know we think of a nonprofit that's doing relief work in another country. You are like zero operations and everything going to the beneficiary, but that's great. But that can't work in America. I mean, we have
It
bills
doesn't
to pay.
exist. Honestly, that does not exist. Anyone who's saying that they have zero operational costs doesn't know their own organization
Yeah,
well.
they're shoving it somewhere because
Yeah, I mean, and if that is coming from free labor from people, we call that something else here, right? Yes, you can have volunteers, but there's different accountability with, staff than there is with volunteers. And I've had some amazing volunteers over the years, and they do function wonderfully, but it's not the same as staff doing the work day in, day out, 40, 50,
And
sometimes 60
speaking
hours a
up
week.
for volunteers, I'm a volunteer here with you.
Which is, I would say you're
Speaking up for
hybrid.
volunteers. I'm speaking up for volunteers here.
And volunteer, and like I said, I've had wonderful volunteers, over the years, so I would not say anything about
We'll talk
volunteers.
on that topic. We'll talk
Yeah,
on that topic
yeah.
offline. Yeah.
And yeah, so I think, I think it's important that, again, we name it, right? Because if I like to say, Lisa's heard this many times, that what we're doing is a generational thing. We are showing our children what our values are by how we, not only what we give, who we give to, but how we give. Right. And understanding the full cost, like that's, it's the full cost of organizations, what that is, and making sure we give it and we don't tie nonprofits' hands, right, and nonprofit leaders' hands by only giving them half of the cost of the program and then expecting double the outcome. So, thank you.
I think I feel like adding a comment and something that I learned right in the beginning of starting Olive, and I've since studied it in Forces for Good and everything, that the strength of an organization, of a nonprofit, is its volunteer core. And I think one of my requests to our staff would be, how do we develop, manage, cultivate the volunteer core? And it's different for each nonprofit. And in the context of Olive, there are plenty of opportunities and plenty of volunteers. But in the in the context of AMCF or somebody else, there may not be that abundant availability of things to do and the volunteers to do them. So it's really it's a program to be created and managed as it's relevant to the organization.
And we do have volunteers and interns, and of course, our entire board are volunteers. But in addition, we do have, volunteers, which then are managed by staff. So
Yeah,
we're very fortunate. People, like to do things with us, and alhamdulillah. So we are fortunate to get volunteers. But I always like to say, with each volunteer comes a management role.
Yeah.
Right, that needs to be managed. And trust me, I have gone through my fair share of volunteer
Sure.
managers who are volunteers themselves and trying to manage volunteers, and that in itself, it's always
definitely
the
there.
staff needs. Yeah. So, and I'm very mindful that each person you're managing, each program you're starting, managing people is not an easy task either, right? That's time consuming, and often people
skills.
say, hey, we'll just add more staff, but it's not just you get additional resources, you also have to have additional time to manage the staff. So it's not always a one-to-one gain. So, want to make sure that in itself is valued, right? We have to make sure that, oh, you got money, you can hire staff, but that there are certain things that take additional resources as well.
And
So
that sounds like a whole other presentation, ladies, and
yes.
we can do this at managing. So I want to be mindful if there's any final comments. Otherwise, we'll stop the recording. If you're happy to chat afterwards, but any final comments on strategic planning? Otherwise, I'm going to pause recording. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us.